Hello, everyone. My name is Eileen Soltero, and today I'm going to be discussing an article written by Paula Winky and Xiaowen Zhang, written in 2019. The article title is How a Third Grade Reading Retention Law Will Affect ELLs in Michigan and a Call for Research from Child ELL Reading Development. So, a brief overview of the article. The article examines Michigan's Read by Grade 3 law, which was passed in 2016 and goes into effect spring of 2020. The article also researches how the MSTEP and the WIDA assess ELLs and how the two tests correlate with one another. This article discusses how, in accordance with Michigan's Read by Grade 3 law, students who don't meet the passing requirement for both tests will be unable to proceed on to the next level or grade. The main focus of the article was to research how this new law will affect different types of ELLs. So some key words to get to know before we begin is, what is the MSTEP? The MSTEP is the Michigan State Test of Educational Progress, which is a 21st century computer-based assessment that is used to determine how well students master state standards. The MSTEP is also going to be the test that determines the benchmark in regards to whether third grade students pass on to the fourth grade. What are ELLs? An ELL is a person who is learning the English language and who already has a first language other than English. The WIDA is a test made specifically for ELLs and is a large-scale English language proficiency summative test. So what does the Read by Grade 3 law entail? This law affects third graders in Michigan State and any third grader who reads below level or who fails the grade 3 state English language part assessment is not allowed to progress on to the next grade. There are some exemptions to this assessment. Those are ELLs who have had less than 3 years of English language instruction and special needs students. However, these exemptions are not automatic, and in order to be exempt, either a parent or a teacher needs to apply for a good cause exemption, or they can submit a portfolio, or a different assessment could also be used in place. What are the reasons for this law? This law is based on the theory that students who don't learn to read by grade level, students who don't learn to read at grade level by third grade are less likely to be academically successful later in their program. Some states also claim that students who are unable to read well by third grade will fail academically, and fail to graduate high school. So when researching this topic, the two research questions were, what is the relationship between third grade ELLs and STEP ELA assessment scores and their reading subtest scores from the SS English proficiency assessments? And how would the new Michigan retention law affect ELLs in Michigan as the law had been in effect in spring 2016? So when conducting this research was a quantitative study, and the data used for the study was from spring 2016, from the Michigan Department of Education, or the MDA, specifically the standardized reading test scores from third graders. The result of research is based on 8,323 third grade ELLs who took both tests, with a focus on the top 5 home languages, which were Spanish, Arabic, Bengali, Albani, and Chinese. The data was then run through a persona correlation between the MSTEP and the WIDA assess to see if they were related. By placing the data on a graph, you could see how the rate at which third graders ELL pass or fail. In addition, the researchers examined how the state background variables, such as economic status and home language, affected those who pass and fail. So here's kind of how it was measured with the MSTEP. We could see that there was 4 levels between like non-proficient and proficient, with in between level 2 and level 3, which was the proposed MSTEP proficiency cutoff. So it was kind of just like a pass or fail. In regards to the WIDA, we could see that the WIDA doesn't have a cutoff, and instead it places students on a developing scale. Students begin at the entering stage, so right here, stage 1, with reaching all the way up here, being the highest level. So here are the results for the research. Here's the graph that they compiled all the research on. Here we can see is the M-STEP with the 1300 score being the cutoff. And with the WIDA test, they didn't necessarily do a cutoff. Instead, how they divided it, it was students who scored on this side of the line were the low WIDA assessed achievers, and students who fell on this side of the line were the high WIDA assessed achievers. And this red line right here represents the linear representation between the M-STEP and the WIDA. And this blue line here best describes the relationship between the WIDA and the M-STEP. Here we can see that if these two tests have a linear relationship, we should see somewhat of an overlap between these two lines, which we do up here. However, when the scores go down on the WIDA scale, this line, we don't see a similar pattern on the M-STEP. This tells us that the M-STEP is not necessarily doing their job of discriminating between proficiency and low proficiency students. So another explanation is, according to the graph, most ELLs scored very high on the WIDA reading assess. The WIDA assess scores are identified between the 6 assess reading levels, with 1 being the lowest and 6 being the highest. According to the results, most students received a 5 and no students received 1. In regards to the M-STEP scores, most students were below the passing score. Unlike the WIDA assess score, the M-STEP is a pass or fail test, with failing indicating that students need to repeat the 3rd grade. M-STEP is also divided into four test score brackets that we saw previously. The passing score in accordance to the M-STEP was the 1300 mark. Most students, according to the study, reached a score of 1,280, which was unfortunately below the passing score, indicating that most ELLs will need to repeat the grade. So here's just another reminder of the M-STEP bracket scores in the 4 levels. So effects that the 2020 law will have on ELLs. So when we overlapped this information, we could see that by pass rates in regards to academic status, only 50% of non-economically disadvantaged ELLs passed, and 25% of economically disadvantaged ELLs passed. 31% of overall ELLs passed. In regards to home language, 23% of Spanish ELLs passed, 27% of Arabic ELLs passed, and 39% of Bengali ELLs passed, and so for the Chinese and Albani, you can see that percentage there. In conclusion, this article discusses how teachers in Michigan are getting this article discusses how teachers in Michigan are getting ready for this law by heavily pushing the reading programs onto students. However, as the data was shown, the M-STEP scores do not accurately represent ELLs and are ultimately not good for deciding whether or not these students are at risk of academic failure. The researchers conclude by sharing that in order for a higher rate of passing ELLs, the MDA would need to reconsider and ultimately lower the score that was proposed. That's all. Thank you guys for watching, and bye.